Put out the candles, his wife said from the doorway. All of them, please. The Duke of Yarrowdale did not move at once. He stood in the middle of the great bedchamber with his coat over his arm, and he looked at the woman he had married 9 hours ago, and he understood that whatever he did in the next half-minute would be remembered by both of them for the rest of their lives. There were 7 candles burning. 2 on the mantel, 2 on the dressing table, 3 in the branched stick by the bed, and the fire besides, throwing its slow red light across the carpet. It had taken the housekeeper an hour to make the room look like this. Hothouse roses on the table, the bed turned down. Every soft, warm, welcoming thing that a great house knew how to do for a bride, done thoroughly and done with love, because the servants of Yarrowdale had waited 11 years for a duchess and had decided, without consulting him, to adore this one. And Clemency stood in the doorway in her wrapper with her arms crossed over her body as though the room were freezing, and asked him to put out the light. Every candle, Adrian said. Everyone. And the fire? She hesitated. He watched her hesitate, and he watched her decide that she could not ask him to smother his own hearth on a night in March, and he saw the small collapse in her shoulders as she surrendered that one point. The fire may stay, she said, if you would turn the screen. Clemency. Please do not ask me why. Her voice was perfectly level. That was the thing about her. It had been the thing about her from the first hour he had known her. Her voice never shook. It went quiet, and it went level, and it went on saying sensible words while the rest of her stood very still, like a woman standing on a cliff and describing the weather. Please, only do it, and do not ask me why, and I will be everything a wife should be. I promise you that. Only put out the candles. He put out the candles. He did it slowly, one at a time, with the little brass snuffer that hung by the mantel, and he did not look at her while he did it, because it seemed to him that a woman who had asked for darkness deserved not to be examined while she waited for it. Mantel, dressing table, the branched stick by the bed. The room went down by degrees, warm gold to dull amber, until only the fire was left, and he set the tall lacquered screen before it so that the light lay along the floor and did not climb the walls. Thank you, she said. You have nothing to thank me for. He heard her come into the room. He heard the door close. He heard in the dark the sound of a woman drawing a breath the way a soldier draws one before a charge, and something in Adrian Vane, 9th Duke of Yarrowdale, who had stood at Ciudad with the guns going and had not moved, went cold with a fear he could not name. Clemency, he said. How long have you been afraid of me? I am not afraid of you. Then of what? The fire cracked. Somewhere far below in the house a door closed, and the sound went up through the old bones of Yarrowdale and died. Of the moment, she said, when you find out what you have married. 6 weeks earlier he had not known she existed. That was the part that would trouble him afterward, the sheer appalling accident of it. If his Aunt Sophia had not fallen ill, if the physician had not insisted on a companion, if the companion the agency sent had not been a vicar's daughter from a flat green corner of the Shire with no fortune, no connections and no discernible interest in becoming a duchess, he would have gone through the whole of his life without ever once hearing Clemency Marsh laugh. She had been reading aloud when he first came into his aunt's sitting room. He had come from London in the rain, filthy and short-tempered, and he had stopped in the doorway because the reader had a low, clear, unhurried voice and was doing something to a very dull volume of sermons that the author had certainly never intended. She was, very slightly and very respectfully, making fun of it. His aunt had been laughing so hard she had to hold her ribs. Adrian, Sophia had gasped. Adrian, come in, you great thundercloud, and be introduced. Miss Marsh, this is my nephew, whom the newspapers call the Duke of Yarrowdale and I call a nuisance. And Miss Marsh had risen and curtsied, and had looked at him with a pair of grey eyes that took in his rain-ruined coat, his black temper, and the glove on his right hand which he never removed, and had said quite calmly, Your Grace, you are wet. Shall I ring for tea, or would you rather stand there dripping and be admired? Nobody had spoken to him like that in 11 years. He had gone back to London. He had come again within the fortnight on a pretext so thin that his aunt had not even bothered to pretend to believe it. He came a 3rd time and a 4th, and by then he had stopped pretending too, and had begun to sit in that shabby sunlit room in the afternoons, a man warming his hands at a fire he had no right to. She was 27. She had been in service, in one form or another, since she was 19 when her father died and left her a Bible, a good name, and £140. She played the pianoforte badly and knew it and played anyway. She could not ride. She could name every bird in the hedgerow by its call, and did walking beside him, without any idea how rare it was for the Duke of Yarrowdale to be walked beside. And she never went without long sleeves. He had noticed that in the 3rd week. It was a hot September. The whole county went about half melted, and Miss Marsh sat in the window with her sleeves buttoned to the wrist and a fichu at her throat and her hands, always in gloves, cotton in the day, kid in the evening. She took them off to play the pianoforte, and she put them on again the moment she rose, quickly, the way a man puts on his coat in front of strangers. He had thought little of it. He wore a glove himself. He had asked her to marry him on a Tuesday, in the U Walk badly. He had made a hash of it. He had begun by listing the practical advantages, because the practical advantages were the only ground on which he could stand without shaking, and he had got as far as the jointure before she said, "Your Grace," and stopped him. "Adrian," he said. Adrian. She had said it the way one tries a word in a foreign language. Then why? Why what? Why me? And do not say the estate wants a mistress, because the estate has Mrs. Paget and she frightens the pheasants and does very well. Why me? And he had stood in the green shadow of the yews with his heart going like a drum and had told the truth, which he had not done in a proposal or anywhere else for a long time. Because since August, he had said, there has not been a single hour of any day in which the thought of you has not been in my head. 'Cause you looked at me on the first day of our acquaintance and did not look away. Do you know how long it has been since a woman did not look away? Because I have been alone in that house for 11 years and I did not know it was a grief until I heard you laughing in it. That is why. Marry me. She had gone white. He had thought, God help him, he had actually thought standing there, that it was joy. She had not answered him for 2 days. And when she came to him at last in the library in the evening, she had stood very straight with her gloved hands folded, and she had said, "If you marry me, you will be marrying something you have not seen. I will not tell you what it is. I will only tell you that it is there, and that men have found it insupportable. If you wish to withdraw when you know that much, I shall never speak of it again, and I will leave the house tomorrow and be grateful to you all my life." "Is it a husband?" he had asked, because it was the only thing he could think of that would make her look like that. No, no, then it is nothing. He had crossed to her. He had taken her hand, gloved in his own gloved hand, the two of them like duellists, he thought later, both armored to the fingertips, and had said, "Whatever it is, clemency, it is a small thing set against you. Marry me." And she had shut her eyes and said yes, and he had felt her hand shaking inside the glove. They were married in the chapel at Yarrowdale on a bright cold morning in March. She wore grey silk, high to the throat, long to the wrist. His aunt wept. The village turned out along the drive with primroses in their hats, and the old butler, Rigg, who had carried the previous Duke's coffin, stood at the head of the steps and could not get through the phrase, "Her Grace," without stopping in the middle of it. There had been a dinner. There had been 40 people and toasts and a fiddler, and through all of it Adrian had watched his wife smile with her mouth and stay somewhere else entirely with her eyes, like a woman counting the hours until a sentence should be carried out. And now the sentence was here, and the candles were out, and she stood in his bedchamber in the dark and said, in that terrible level voice, of the moment when you find out what you have married, "Come here," he said. "Adrian, come here. I am not going to touch you. Come and sit down." He heard her move. He put out his left hand and found the back of the chair by the fire and turned it toward her, and after a moment she sat, a shape darker than the dark, her hands twisting in her lap. He did not sit. He stood at the mantel with his back to the screened fire, and he thought about how a man conducts a retreat, slowly, in good order, giving up ground only where he must. "You have made me a promise tonight," he said. "You said you would be everything a wife should be. I release you from it." Her head came up. "What?" "Tonight and every night, until you tell me otherwise. There is no debt here. There is no bargain to be paid off in the dark. You are the Duchess of Yarrowdale. You are mistress of this house and of everything in it, and none of that is owed to me on any terms whatsoever." He heard his own voice go rough and could not help it. "Do you understand what I am telling you?" Whatever it is that you are afraid of, it does not have to be paid tonight. There is no reckoning. There is only me standing here wanting to know my wife." For a long moment she said nothing at all. Then she said, "You will want to know it in the end. Yes. And when you do—" "Then tell me now," he said, "and be done, and let us find out together what kind of man I am. 'Cause I have been standing in this room for a quarter of an hour listening to you be brave, Clemency, and I find I cannot bear it." The fire ticked. The screen made a long slab of shadow across the floor. Very slowly, in the dark, his wife stood up and began to unbutton her sleeve. "No," Adrian said, "not like this." Her hands stopped. "Not in the dark," he said, as though it were a thing to be smuggled past me. "If you are going to show me, then light the candle and show me, and let me see your face while you do it, 'cause I will not have you standing in a black room waiting to hear me flinch. You will flinch. Then you will see me do it," he said, "and you will know exactly how much it cost me and how little. Clemency, light the candle." She did not move for so long that he thought he had lost her. Then she went to the mantel and took the spill and knelt at the edge of the screen and touched the paper to the fire. And she came back with the flame cupped in her hand and lit one candle, one only, and set it on the little table between them. She stood in that small circle of light in her wrapper, and she was the most frightened thing he had ever seen, and she was not trembling at all. "When I was 11, she said, the kitchen at the vicarage court. It was night. My mother was already dead. My sister Anne was 6 and she slept in the room above the range. She said it flatly, the way a woman recites a lesson she has said too many times to feel. I got her out. The stair was gone by then, so we came down the outside of the house by the ivy and the water butt, and she was on my back and the fire came out of the kitchen window under us. It took about 9 seconds. I have had a good deal of time to work out how long it was." He did not speak. "Anne is married now," Clemency said. "She lives in Norfolk and has a house full of noise, and she is entirely well and there is not a mark on her." Her chin came up. "That is what I bought. And the price?" Adrian said. "The price," she said, "is my right arm from the wrist to the shoulder, and my back on that side from the shoulder to the waist, and a little at the throat here, which is why I wear the fichu." She lifted her hand and did not quite touch her own collarbone and let the hand fall. "It is not a wound, Adrian. It has been 16 years. It does not hurt me. It does not weaken me. I can lift a churn and carry a child and do anything a woman does. It is only—" and for the first time one small crack came into the level voice. "It is only very ugly, and I have learned what people do when they see it." "Tell me what they do." "Must I?" "No," he said. "But I think you have never once been permitted to." She looked at the candle for a while. "They are kind," she said. "That is the strange part. Almost all of them are kind. They say, 'Oh, my poor girl,' and their eyes go somewhere else in the room and stay there, and afterward they are careful with me, as one is careful with a cracked jug. I was to have married once, 12 years ago. A curate, a good, mild, well-meaning man, and when I told him, he said that he honored me for it and that we should be as brother and sister always. He was quite proud of himself. He wrote to me about it." She smiled, and it was worse than tears. "And there was a night, when I was 21 and in service in a house in Bath, when a gentleman of that house thought it amusing to take hold of my sleeve in front of the company, to see whether the rumour was true. It tore. He looked. And then he laughed. Adrian and the room laughed with him, because they did not know what else to do, and I stood there in front of 30 people with my arm bare, and I did not cry, and I did not run, and I have never in my life been so far away from every living soul." The fire made its small sounds behind the screen. "His name," Adrian said. "No." "Clemency?" "No." She said it gently. "Because you would do something, and it would be in the papers, and then it would be a story that everyone tells, and I should be for the rest of my life the woman with the arm. I have spent 16 years learning to be something else. Do not make me the arm." He stood very still. He had gone into that room with a plan of a sort, with the vague, decent, useless intentions of a man who meant to be gentle. All of it was gone. What was left, standing on the hearthrug of the room where he had been born, was a clarity so total that it felt like cold water. "Come here," he said, and she came, and he did not touch her. "Look at my hand," he said. He held it up, the right one gloved as it had been gloved at his own wedding, at the king's levee, at every dinner and every ball for 11 years. You have never asked me about this, he said. Not once, in 6 weeks. Everyone asks. The bold ones ask outright, and the polite ones look at it for a quarter of an hour, and then talk very brightly about the harvest. You have never looked at it at all. I know what it is to be looked at. Yes, you do. And he took off the glove. He did it in front of her, in the candlelight, which he had not done in the presence of another living creature since the surgeon's tent. The hand that came out of it was a ruin. The powder had gone up at the breech when the gun burst at Ciudad, and what it had left him was a claw of shining, ridged, unnatural skin from the fingertips to a hand's breadth above the wrist, 2 fingers that would not straighten, and a thumb that worked and was grateful for it. Clemency did not gasp. Clemency did not look away. She reached out and stopped, her fingers a half-inch from him, and looked up at his face for permission, and something in Adrian's chest tore clean in two, 'cause as in 11 years nobody had ever once asked him first. He nodded. She took his hand in both of hers. There, she said, unsteadily. There. Well, it is a wicked-looking thing, isn't it? It is. Does it pain you in the cold? Every winter of my life. Then we shall have the fires built up in November, said the Duchess of Yarrowdale, and you will say nothing about the coal bill, and she bent her head over his ruined hand, and he felt her breath on it, and then a tear, hot, on skin that had almost no feeling left in it, and felt that. Clemency, he said, Clemency, listen to me. I am going to make you a promise, and I want you to hold me to it every day of my life. She looked up. I will never pity you, Adrian said. Not once. Not ever. I will not be careful with you, and I will not lower my voice, and I will not manage you like a cracked jug, and if I catch myself beginning, you have my leave to say so in front of the whole household and shame me for it. What was done to you was not a misfortune, madam. It was a rescue. You went up a burning stair for your sister when you were 11 years old, and you came down it. And there is a woman in Norfolk with a house full of noise because you did. That is not a thing to be hidden under a sleeve. His voice was not steady now, and he did not care. It is the bravest thing I have ever heard of, and I have stood in a breach with the guns going, and I know what I am saying. You will not hide it in this house. Not from me. Not ever. I will not have you ashamed of the best hour of your life. She was weeping now, silently, the tears simply coming, her face quite still. And if the world is cruel about it, he said, the world will find that it has taken on more than it bargained for. But that is for the world. Between the two of us there is to be no darkness, no snuffed candles, no smuggling. You are not a thing I must be brought to accept. You are the woman I love. Do you hear me? You are the woman I love, and I would light every candle in this house before I would consent to look at you in the dark. For a long moment Clemency Vane, Duchess of Yarrowdale, stood in a small ring of candlelight holding her husband's scarred hand in her 2 scarred ones, and said nothing at all. Then she let go of him and reached up and slowly, deliberately, one after another, undid the buttons at her wrist. She did not turn away when she pushed the sleeve back. She looked straight at him while she did it, the way a woman looks at a man she has decided, at last, to trust with the whole of herself, and Adrian looked steadily at what 16 years and 9 seconds had done to her. And he did not flinch, and he did not go away behind his eyes, and he did not say, "Oh, my poor girl." He lifted her arm very gently, and he bent his head, and he kissed the inside of her wrist where the old fire had run. Adrian, she said, and it was not level at all. Light the others, he said. And she did. She went round the room with the spill in her hand, the way she would go round it 1,000 times in the years to come, and she lit the candles on the mantel, on the candles on the dressing table, and the 3 in the branched stick beside the bed. And the room came up warm and gold around them, and the Duke of Yarrowdale took his wife's face in his hands, both hands, the whole and the ruined, and told her again, and this time she believed him. The fire burned low behind the screen. Long before it went out, the last of the candles had guttered down of its own accord, and neither of them had thought of it at all. He woke before dawn, as he always did. His wife was asleep on her side with her scarred arm lying bare across the coverlet, flung out, careless, the way a woman sleeps in a room she is not afraid of. Adrian lay and looked at it in the grey light for a long time, and made himself a second promise, which he did not speak aloud, because it concerned the rest of the world and not her. The rest of the world, it turned out, did not have to be sought. The rest of the world came to Yarrowdale in June. It was his Aunt Sophia's doing, and she was unrepentant. You cannot keep her, Sophia said, thumping her stick on the terrace flags in a box. She is a duchess, Adrian, not a moth. If she is not presented to the county this summer, the county will invent her, and what the county invents will be a great deal worse than anything true. So there was to be a ball at Yarrowdale on Midsummer Eve, the first in 11 years, and the invitations went out to 90 families. And the great house woke like a sleeper, and Clemency went through it with a list in her hand and Mrs. Paget at her heels, ordering the airing of rooms that had not been aired since his mother's time, and Adrian, watching her from the gallery, thought that he had never seen anything in his life so entirely right. The acceptances came back within the week, all 90, and on the 11th of June, going through the pile at breakfast, he found a name. He did not say anything. He finished his coffee, and he walked out to the stables, and he stood for some minutes with his hand on the neck of a horse that did not know why it was suddenly being gripped so hard. Sir Fenton Braille, of Bath. Now of Colston Hall, some 14 miles distant by an inheritance no one had expected him to receive. She had never given him the name. He had never asked again. But there was a manner of man who tears a woman's sleeve in front of 30 people to see whether the rumor is true. And a man of that manner leaves a track through the world as broad as a cart, and in 11 days of quiet inquiry through his aunt's oldest and least discreet acquaintance, Adrian had found it. He told her that evening, because he had promised there would be no smuggling in that house. Clemency stood at the window a long while. Then I shall not come down, she said at last. Clemency, do not. She turned. Her face was white and perfectly composed, and he knew exactly now what that meant. You do not understand what it is. He has only to look at me and smile, Adrian. That is all. He need say nothing at all. He will look at me across your ballroom and he will smile, and I shall be 21 again with my arm bare in front of 30 people, and every soul in the room will see me stop breathing, and by Sunday the county will have the whole of it. Then let him look. You cannot mean that. I mean, said Adrian, that we have been fighting this man for a fortnight, and he has not yet arrived, and he is winning. He tore your sleeve 9 years ago, and he has been holding you by the wrist ever since. He crossed to her. You have 2 courses. You can go up to your room on Midsummer Eve, and he will have beaten you a second time, and it will cost him nothing at all. Or you can come down my stairs on my arm in front of 90 families, and take the thing he thinks he owns and hold it up, and let them all look at it, and then he will have nothing. Nothing, Clemency. There is no power in a secret that its keeper has thrown away. She stared at him. You are asking me, she said slowly, to go into a ballroom with my arms bare. No, said Adrian. I would not dare ask it. I am telling you it is the only thing in the world I have ever been afraid to ask for, and that I will stand at the foot of those stairs on Midsummer Eve either way, and be the proudest man in England either way, and if you come down in gloves to the elbow I will never once mention it to you as long as I live. He paused. But I am going down those stairs without mine. Her lips parted. Adrian, your hand is a wicked-looking thing, he said. You told me so yourself. I have hidden it for 11 years, and I have been unhappy for 11 years, and I did not know until March that those 2 facts were acquainted. He lifted the gloved hand and looked at it as one looks at an old, tiresome, faithful dog. I got it serving my country. You got yours carrying your sister down the side of a burning house. We have neither of us anything to apologize for, and I am tired, my love. I am so very tired of asking that room's permission to exist. Clemency Vane put her hands over her face. Then she took them down, and her eyes were shining, and she said, in a voice that shook and did not care that it shook, then have Mrs. Elcott come up on Thursday. The grey silk will want altering. The ballroom at Yarrowdale had 11 chandeliers, and on Midsummer Eve every crystal drop in every one of them was burning. Adrian stood at the foot of the great stair at 9:30 with 140 people behind him and the fiddles tuning in the gallery, and he heard the sound go through the room the way wind goes through barley, a rustle, a turning, a hush. His wife was coming down. She wore grey silk, because she had married him in grey silk, and she was a woman who kept her own anniversaries. It was cut low at the throat, with no fichu. The sleeves ended above the elbow. She wore no gloves at all, and the pearls at her neck were his grandmother's, and the light of 11 chandeliers came down on her from above and lay along her bare right arm, wrist to shoulder, and did not spare 1 inch of it. She was not smiling. She was not defiant. She came down the staircase of that house at the pace of a woman who has all the time in the world, with her head up and a scarred hand resting light as a leaf on the banister, and she looked out over the whole assembled county with a serenity that Adrian would remember on his deathbed. The room went absolutely silent. He heard, quite clearly, a woman near the door draw in her breath, and then the Duke of Yarrowdale, in front of 140 people, stripped the glove from his right hand and dropped it on the marble, and put that hand up to receive his wife. There was no sound at all now. Every eye in the room went to it. The ruined hand held down the light of the chandeliers, palm up, waiting entirely unhidden, offered. Clemency came down the last 3 steps and laid her scarred hand in his scarred one. "Your Grace," she said. "Your Grace," said Adrian, and lifted a hand to his mouth and kissed it, and turned with her to face the room. "My friends," he said. "My wife, afterward, people would disagree about who began the applause." Old Rig at the door always insisted it was his Aunt Sophia, who was seen to strike the floor twice with her stick before anybody moved. Mrs. Paget swore it was the vicar. The vicar swore it was Lady Encroft, who was 81 and deaf and clapped whenever she was uncertain what else to do, and who was heard to say very loudly at the height of it, "Well, and why should she not? It hardly mattered. It came and it swelled." And it went round that ballroom and up into the gallery until the fiddlers themselves put down their bows to join it, and it went on for a long, long time, and Clemency stood in the middle of it with her chin up and her arm bare and 2 bright tears running down her face, and did not wipe them away. Adrian did not look at Sir Fenton Braille once. He knew exactly where the man was. He had known from the moment he entered the room, and he found, standing there with his wife's hand in his and 140 people applauding her, that he had no need whatever of him. That the punishment he had spent a fortnight designing in the small hours was already being carried out, more completely than he could have contrived it, by 140 pairs of hands. Braille left before supper. He did not return to the county that season. In the following year he sold Colston Hall and went abroad, and Adrian, who read the notice at breakfast, folded the paper and passed the marmalade and said nothing, and his wife, who had also read it, said nothing either. And they had the rest of their toast in the excellent silence of 2 people who have found that a thing has stopped mattering. The county talked, of course. The county talked for a month, but it did not talk in the way she had feared. It could not. It is a difficult thing to whisper about a woman who has stood under 11 chandeliers with the whole of it plain to see, and has been applauded for 4 minutes together. The wind is taken out of a whisper by the simple absence of anything to reveal. What the county said instead, first in the drawing rooms, and then in the lanes, and at last in the market town, where it hardened into legend, was that the Duchess of Yarrowdale had carried her sister down a burning wall when she was 11 years old, and that she had the scars of it, and that she wore short sleeves in the summer like any other woman, and that her husband thought her the finest thing that had ever come out of the Shire, and that on the whole they were inclined to agree with him. Within 2 years there was scarcely a girl in the parish who could be got to wear a fichu. They had 3 children in the end, 2 boys and a girl, and the girl, who was called Anne, learned to climb before she could properly walk, which everybody said was in the blood and nobody said within her mother's hearing. And on a hot afternoon in a late September, the 12th, or perhaps the 13th of their marriage, he was never afterward certain, the Duke of Yarrowdale came in from the home farm and stood a moment in the doorway of the yellow sitting room unnoticed. His wife was asleep in the window seat with a book fallen open on her lap. The sun was full on her. Her sleeves were rolled to the elbow and her bare arms lay loose and easy in the light, and her hands were ungloved, and the old marks of the fire had gone silver with the years, and she looked, in that hot still gold, like that most peaceful creature God ever made. Adrian stood in the doorway with his hat in his ruined hand and did not go in, because he did not want to wake her, and because he had learned a long time ago to take his happiness slowly. 11 candles, he thought. 11 chandeliers. A whole house full of light, and not one shadow left in it worth the name. She stirred and opened her eyes, and found him watching her, and smiled without moving at all. "You are staring, Your Grace," she said. "I am," said Adrian, and came in, and sat down beside her, and took her hand. "I intend to go on doing it. I gave you my word."